In the heart of Washington, D.C., tension was at an all-time high. The political climate had grown increasingly hostile and the battle for power had intensified. Pam Bondi, the United States Attorney General under President Donald Trump, had been dealing with countless legal challenges over the past few years, but nothing like the one she was about to face. Fani Willis, the District Attorney of Fulton County, Georgia, had recently made headlines when she announced charges against several high-profile figures, including President Trump. These charges were centered around accusations of quid pro quo, a classic move in the political game where one party allegedly offers something in exchange for political favor. The media had eagerly latched onto the narrative, pushing the story into the spotlight. But Pam Bondi wasn't one to be intimidated easily. As one of the most vocal defenders of President Trump, she had built a reputation for standing firm against what she viewed as politically motivated attacks. And this latest move by Fani Willis? It was no different in her eyes. The confrontation began when Fani Willis, in a highly publicized press conference, boldly accused Pam Bondi of being complicit in a scheme involving quid pro quo. She suggested that Bondi, acting under the direction of President Trump, had used her position to influence legal proceedings for political gain. The press loved it. Headlines screamed about the accusation, painting Bondi as part of a deep-seated conspiracy to manipulate the justice system. Bondi, however, wasn't about to let the charges stand without a fight. Within hours of Willis's press conference, Bondi issued a statement. "These accusations are baseless," she declared, her voice unwavering. "This is nothing but a politically motivated attack against me and the administration I serve. I will not be bullied into submission." It didn't take long for the two women to come face to face in a public showdown. The stage was set for what promised to be a battle of words that would leave no room for doubt about where their loyalties lay. Pam Bondi, wearing a sharp, professional suit, stood confidently at the podium. Her piercing blue eyes scanned the room full of reporters, and she knew this moment was critical. She had to make it clear that she wasn't going to let Fani Willis's accusations tarnish her reputation or the reputation of President Trump. "Fani Willis has made some serious allegations against me," Bondi began, her voice calm but filled with determination. "She claims that I was involved in a quid pro quo scheme. But let me tell you something, there is absolutely no truth to that. This is a deliberate attempt to attack the integrity of our legal system." The reporters in the room were hanging on her every word, knowing that this was about to get intense. Bondi paused for a moment before continuing. "Ms. Willis has based her entire case on flimsy accusations and hearsay," she said. "She has no hard evidence, no concrete proof, just a desire to paint me and the president as criminals. This is nothing more than an attempt to undermine the work we've been doing for the American people." At that moment, the tension in the room was palpable. Bondi's words had struck a nerve, and many of the reporters were starting to doubt the strength of the charges against her. But just as Bondi thought she had gained the upper hand, a familiar voice interrupted. Fani Willis had entered the room, her presence commanding attention. She was ready to fight fire with fire. The district attorney of Fulton County wasted no time addressing the press. "Pam Bondi can deny all she wants, but the evidence is there," Willis said, her tone sharp and confident. "We have witnesses, we have documents, and we have a case. If Pam Bondi thinks she can escape responsibility just by making empty statements, she's mistaken." The battle lines had been drawn. The stage was set for one of the most intense legal showdowns the country had ever seen. The room buzzed with a heightened sense of anticipation as Fani Willis continued her aggressive stance. Her words were cutting, precise, and calculated to inflict maximum damage. The media's cameras clicked rapidly as they captured every moment of the verbal duel. It was a showdown like no other, one that would soon dominate the headlines for days to come. Fani Willis didn't waste any time elaborating on her accusations. "Pam Bondi isn't just a puppet in this game," she said, her voice laced with conviction. "She's the one pulling the strings. It's one thing to serve as a legal advisor to the president, but it's another thing to use that power to manipulate the very justice system you swore to uphold. The quid pro quo is real. We have the evidence." Bondi's eyes narrowed slightly as she locked gazes with Willis. She had expected this, of course. She knew that Willis would be relentless. But Bondi had a reputation for resilience, and she wasn't about to let herself be painted as a villain based on empty accusations. She straightened up at the podium, her voice steady and unwavering as she addressed the room. "You want to talk about evidence, Fani?" Bondi began, her tone biting. "Then let's talk about the lack of it. You've made your claims based on speculation and political gamesmanship. But where's the proof? Where's the undeniable, irrefutable evidence that ties me to a quid pro quo scheme? It doesn't exist. And that's why you're trying to paint a narrative instead of presenting facts. She paused, letting her words sink in. The room was silent for a moment, the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. I've been in the political arena long enough to know that these kinds of baseless attacks are just par for the course, Bondi continued. But what Fani Willis doesn't seem to understand is that I've built my career on fighting for justice, not manipulating it. I will not stand idly by while someone like her tries to drag my name and the president's through the mud without any real proof. Fani Willis wasn't about to let Bondi have the last word. She raised her hand, signaling to the press that she had more to say. The reporters quickly shifted their attention back to Willis, eager for the next round of the battle. Pam Bondi can hide behind her lawyer speak all she wants, Willis shot back, her eyes locked onto Bondi with a fierce intensity. But the truth is clear. This isn't just about a political narrative. This is about a pattern of corruption, a pattern of using government power to secure personal gain. The quid pro quo charges are not just accusations, they are backed by hard evidence. Willis turned to the reporters, offering them a pointed look before she continued. We've gathered witness testimonies, financial records, and even audio recordings that directly implicate Bondi in this scheme. It's not just talk, it's a well-documented case of abuse of power. And I will ensure that this case is brought to light, no matter how much Bondi tries to deflect. Bondi's expression hardened as she listened to Willis. She had anticipated that the district attorney would rely on sensationalist rhetoric, but the mention of witness testimonies and audio recordings caught her attention. This was no longer just a matter of political posturing, it was a legal battle that could determine her fate. The thought of her reputation being tarnished by false claims made her blood boil, and she knew she had to act fast. I'm not here to play games, Fani Bondi said, her voice rising with controlled anger. I'm here to defend the truth. And the truth is that there is no quid pro quo. There's no evidence, no testimony, and no facts to support your claims. What you're doing is dangerous. You're using the legal system to push a political agenda, and I won't stand for it. She leaned in slightly, her eyes never leaving Willis's. You're attacking me and the president because we stand for something different, something that challenges your narrative. But I'm telling you right now, I will not back down. The tension in the room reached a boiling point. The reporters were on the edge of their seats, eager to hear what would come next. Bondi's words had been direct and forceful, but Willis wasn't finished yet. The game was far from over. Willis stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she prepared to deliver her next blow. Pam Bondi can deny all she wants, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. But the truth will come out. And when it does, we'll see just how much of a fighter she really is. As the tension between Pam Bondi and Fani Willis simmered, the stage was set for the real fireworks. The media was already buzzing with rumors and speculations, but now it was time for Willis to back up her accusations with something concrete. The world was watching, and Bondi knew that whatever came next could be the turning point in this high-stakes battle. The following day, Fani Willis held another press conference, but this time it wasn't just words that she was bringing to the table. She had something more, a collection of supposed evidence that, according to her, would blow Bondi's defense out of the water. As Willis walked up to the podium, she was more confident than ever. Yesterday, Pam Bondi stood before you and denied any wrongdoing, she began, her eyes scanning the room of reporters. But today, I'm going to show you the evidence that proves she's lying. A hush fell over the crowd as Willis pulled out a series of documents, one by one, laying them out on the table in front of her. She glanced at the first one and held it up for the cameras to see. This is an email chain that was sent from Pam Bondi's office to an aide in the White House, Willis said, her voice steady but filled with purpose. In it, Bondi explicitly discusses a meeting with several high-ranking officials in exchange for political favors. This is not a coincidence, this is quid pro quo. The reporters leaned in, snapping pictures of the document. Bondi, seated in the front row with a tight-lipped expression, was clearly growing impatient. She knew that this moment could be crucial in the court of public opinion, and she had to act fast to counter the narrative being created by Willis. Willis continued, her confidence growing with each piece of evidence she presented. And here, she said, picking up another document, we have a financial record showing a substantial donation made by a prominent donor with direct ties to Pam Bondi. This donation came just days before a key decision was made in a legal case involving that donor's interests. Again, the connection is clear, quid pro quo. The room erupted into murmurs, with the reporters exchanging glances and whispering among themselves. Bondi's face remained stoic, but her mind was racing. She knew that these documents, these alleged pieces of evidence, were damning if they were legitimate. She had to find a way to discredit them before the story spread any further. Fani Willis didn't let up. She went on to play an audio recording, one that she claimed was a conversation between Bondi and a government official. In the recording, Bondi was allegedly heard discussing ways to leverage political favors in exchange for financial contributions to the Trump administration. The recording was clear and the voice unmistakable. As the tape played, the room fell silent. Bondi's eyes narrowed in disbelief. This was the moment that could make or break her. She had to respond, and fast. The reporters were already bombarding her with questions, but Bondi stood up, her voice steady as she addressed the room. "This is a classic case of misdirection," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto the camera. "What Fani Willis is presenting is nothing more than selective editing and cherry-picked documents meant to create a false narrative." She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in before continuing. "Let me be clear, I do not engage in quid pro quo. These documents have been manipulated and that recording has been taken out of context. The reality is that Fani Willis is using her office to wage a political attack against me, and she's willing to do anything to bring down this administration." Bondi's voice had a ring of authority, and while the evidence against her seemed to be mounting, she wasn't about to let it define her. She had spent years in the legal field defending high-profile clients, and she knew the game all too well. "I challenge anyone to come forward with real evidence that stands up in a court of law," she continued. "What we've seen here today is nothing but an attempt to manipulate the media and sway public opinion. It's a classic tactic in today's political landscape, and I won't be a pawn in this game." She turned to the reporters, her gaze unyielding. "I have nothing to hide, and I will fight this every step of the way." Fani Willis's face remained impassive as she watched Bondi's rebuttal unfold. She knew that Bondi's words were calculated, but the question was whether the public would believe her. The press had already begun to spin the story, and it was clear that the battle was far from over. But as the conference ended and the cameras turned off, both women knew that the war for public opinion was just beginning. The political battlefield was shifting, and the media storm around Pam Bondi and Fani Willis showed no sign of letting up. Both sides were dug in, each more determined than the last to prove their version of the truth. What started as a legal battle was now a full-blown war of narratives, each side trying to outmaneuver the other in the court of public opinion. The next few days were a blur of press conferences, interviews, and strategic leaks to the media. Bondi's defense team quickly mobilized, flooding the airwaves with their counterarguments. They went on the offensive, questioning the credibility of the documents Willis had presented. Bondi herself appeared on several major talk shows where she was grilled relentlessly by journalists. "I've been in the trenches of politics for a long time," she said in one interview, her voice calm but resolute. "I know how these things work." Fani Willis is using her position to push a political agenda, and she's willing to twist the facts to make her case. But make no mistake, I will not be intimidated by these attacks. Despite her confidence, Bondi knew that the weight of public perception was slowly turning against her. The media, ever hungry for scandal, had latched onto the story like a pit bull with a bone. Every twist and turn in the saga was analyzed, scrutinized, and dissected. Polls showed a growing divide in public opinion, with some Americans rallying behind Bondi's defense and others believing that the evidence against her was too strong to ignore. Meanwhile, Fani Willis continued to maintain her composure. She had already made significant headway in the media, and she wasn't about to let Bondi's attacks derail her momentum. The Fulton County District Attorney was speaking to the press almost daily, using her platform to further build her case. "We're not backing down," Willis told a reporter during one particularly tense exchange. "The evidence speaks for itself. Pam Bondi and others in the Trump administration have been using their positions of power for personal gain. This is corruption at its finest, and we will ensure that justice is served." Willis's words were powerful, and they resonated with many. She was positioning herself as the voice of the people, the one who would hold powerful figures accountable no matter the cost. But behind the scenes, she was also facing mounting pressure. The case she was pursuing was risky, and there were whispers that some of the evidence she presented might not be as ironclad as it seemed. Still, she was determined to see it through. On the other side, Bondi's legal team had begun preparing for what was inevitably coming, a courtroom showdown. There, in the ultimate arena of justice, they would have the opportunity to directly challenge Willis's evidence and expose any weaknesses in her case. Bondi was confident that once the truth came out, the entire narrative would collapse under its own weight. But the court of public opinion wasn't so easily swayed. And even as the legal battle heated up, the media circus around the case continued to grow. It was during this time that a game-changing piece of information came to light, a development that would shift the entire trajectory of the case. A whistleblower, a former employee from within Fani Willis's office, had come forward with explosive new details about the investigation. The whistleblower claimed that key pieces of evidence, particularly some of the documents Willis had presented, had been manipulated or altered. The revelation sent shockwaves through the media. Bondi and her team immediately seized on this new information, calling for an immediate investigation into Willis's handling of the case. Fani Willis has been caught red-handed, Bondi declared in a fiery statement. The very foundation of her case is built on falsehoods and manipulation. This is a clear abuse of power, and I demand that the authorities investigate this immediately. The American people deserve the truth. The press conference that followed was nothing short of dramatic. Bondi stood before the cameras with a look of triumph, her demeanor now more assertive than ever. The whistleblower's testimony, combined with her team's efforts, had turned the tables. Willis, on the other hand, was not backing down. She held her own press conference soon after Bondi's, defiantly dismissing the whistleblower's claims. This is nothing more than a desperate attempt to discredit the investigation, she said, her voice sharp. We have followed the law to the letter, and there is no evidence that anything has been tampered with. Pam Bondi's accusations are merely a deflection from the truth. The war of words had reached its zenith. Each side now had its own set of supporters, those who believed in Bondi's defense and those who rallied behind Willis's crusade for justice. The American public was divided, and the legal and political stakes had never been higher. The stage was set for the final confrontation, a courtroom drama that would determine not only the fate of Pam Bondi but also the credibility of Fani Willis and her investigation. For weeks, the media had been consumed by the spectacle, but now the time for talk was over. The only thing that mattered was the truth and whether or not it would hold up under the scrutiny of the court. Bondi's defense team was prepared. They had spent countless hours combing through every piece of evidence, scrutinizing every document and statement. They were ready to dismantle Willis's case, piece by piece, and expose what they believed were fatal flaws. But they also knew that this was not just about legal strategy, it was about winning the hearts and minds of the American people. On the first day of the trial, the courtroom was packed with reporters, legal experts, and spectators. The air was thick with anticipation as the judge called the court to order. Bondi entered the room with a calm and collected demeanor, her legal team by her side. Her reputation was on the line, and she knew that this was her moment to prove that the charges against her were nothing but a political ploy. Willis, too, was present, her face steely and determined. She had spent years building her career, and this case was her opportunity to prove that she was a champion of justice, someone willing to take on the powerful no matter the cost. The tension between the two women was palpable, and it was clear that neither was going to back down. The trial began with opening statements. Bondi's attorney, a seasoned litigator, took the floor first. He was eloquent, composed, and forceful as he dismantled the accusations against his client. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, this case is nothing more than a politically motivated attack. There's no evidence, none, that proves Pam Bondi engaged in any wrongdoing. The documents presented by the prosecution have been manipulated, the recordings distorted. What we have here is a blatant attempt to smear a woman who has dedicated her life to public service. He pointed to the exhibit board displaying the documents and recordings that had been presented in the media. These so-called pieces of evidence are fabricated, and we will show you that they were tampered with to create a false narrative. The prosecution's case is built on a house of cards, and it will crumble under scrutiny. Pam Bondi sat in the front row, her eyes locked on the jury as her attorney made his case. She knew that the next few hours could change everything. This was her chance to clear her name, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. When it was Fani Willis's turn to deliver her opening statement, she was equally compelling. She stood tall, her voice resolute as she spoke to the jury. What we have here is not just a case of political corruption, it is a case of betrayal. Pam Bondi, along with others in the Trump administration, used her position to exploit the very people she was meant to protect. The evidence we have is clear, and it points directly to a pattern of illegal behavior. She laid out the documents, the emails, and the recordings once again, this time in the context of the courtroom. This is not a smear campaign. This is not a political attack. This is about accountability. This is about ensuring that those in power cannot use their position to enrich themselves at the expense of the American people. The opening statements were just the beginning. Over the next few days, both sides presented their cases. Bondi's legal team went after the evidence, carefully pointing out inconsistencies, contradictions, and potential forgeries. They called expert witnesses who testified that the documents presented by Willis's office had been altered in subtle but significant ways. Meanwhile, Willis's team pushed back, offering counterarguments and bringing forward their own set of witnesses. They argued that the whistleblower's testimony was unreliable and that the evidence was solid. It was a battle of wits, each side trying to outmaneuver the other in front of the jury. As the trial wore on, the media coverage intensified. The story had become the nation's obsession. Every development in the courtroom was dissected, analyzed, and debated. Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and hashtags. Some Americans believed that Bondi was the victim of a political witch hunt, while others were convinced that she was guilty of the charges leveled against her. The country seemed to be watching with bated breath, waiting for the final verdict. Then the turning point came. Bondi's defense team presented a smoking gun, an email that had somehow slipped through Willis's investigation. It was an email from Fani Willis herself, sent to one of her assistants, discussing the possibility of using the case against Bondi to boost her own political career. The email was dated just days before the press conference in which Willis had first presented the allegations against Bondi. The courtroom fell silent. The email was damning, and it raised serious questions about Willis's motivations. Bondi's team quickly capitalized on this new revelation, arguing that Willis had been pursuing the case for personal gain rather than out of a desire for justice. With the email in hand, the defense team made their closing arguments. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have here is a clear case of abuse of power," Bondi's attorney said. "Fani Willis has used her office not to seek justice, but to further her own career. The evidence is clear. Pam Bondi is innocent." The jury deliberated for just under 3 days, the weight of the case bearing down on them. Finally, they returned with a verdict: not guilty. The courtroom erupted in reaction. Bondi's legal team was jubilant, while Willis's team looked stunned. Fani Willis herself stood motionless, her face a mask of disbelief. The media, which had been so certain of Bondi's guilt, was now forced to turn the spotlight on the prosecution and question the integrity of the investigation. Pam Bondi left the courtroom a free woman, but the war was far from over. The public's attention would shift, but the scars of this battle would remain for a long time. Both Bondi and Willis had fought hard, and in the end, it was Bondi who had come out victorious. The media narrative was shifting again, this time focusing on the aftermath. Bondi had cleared her name, but Fani Willis's future as a political figure had been called into question. The case had ended, but the repercussions were far-reaching. In the end, the story wasn't just about the battle between two powerful women, it was about the forces that shaped their paths, the systems they navigated, and the costs of playing in the highest stakes of politics and power.